who are going to lead this panel. It's going to be great. Lots of good information. If you have questions, make sure you put them into the chat box umbrella, and I'll leave it over to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Like she said, my name is Drew Fearson. I am the CEO of Ninja Jobs. We are both a high-end cybersecurity recruiting platform and agency service. And we have Vince Crisler, who is one of the founder and CEO of Dark Cubed, which is a cybersecurity company. And we have Lacey Maddalena, and she is an employer branding specialist at Recorded Future, but also spent some time in recruiting as well for them prior to that. So we wanted to talk to you guys today about careers in cybersecurity, with a focus on kind of what all of you have been going through and doing is kind of charting an entry level or a different career path with the program here. So let's just start from the top, guys. So in terms of the cybersecurity industry, what skills do you think are most important to hiring companies out there right now?
Do you want to go first, Lacey?
I guess so.
All right.
So I think from my perspective, I'm at Recorded Future. We're a threat intelligence company. And I have done recruiting on both the sales and the technical side. And I would say across the board, the soft skills really do matter, right? I think someone who is really curious and wants to learn and is open to like a fast-paced environment, I think is important because our industry is changing rapidly and growing rapidly. So I think those are two of the softer skills that are super important these days.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, on one hand, there's the check the box skills that are going to get you an interview, and then there are the skills that are going to win the interview. And in terms of having an interview, I've built and successfully run both a services and a product company, so I've seen and hired on both sides of this. The creativity, curiosity, self-drive components are really important. And I would also add, and we can get into this more later, but so often I think candidates see an interview as something they have to win, right? Like, I have an interview, I want to get this job no matter what, instead of looking for a job that's a right fit. So if you're talking to an employer that needs somebody that's a self-starter, can work without a lot of parameters, and you are somebody that needs structure, be upfront, because that employment's not going to last long. And so that's what we're really looking for when hiring, is kind of the right fit and the right discussion with the candidate to make sure that they could be a good fit for the company.
Yeah, we hear that time and time again as well. Just to echo what both of you said, is one of the things that interviewers look for when just talking with people is, A, can they effectively communicate with others, right? Whether it's an external customer or an internal IT department or whoever, just internal stakeholders in general. That is a much larger component within security now, as opposed to 10 years ago, right? When it was just people sitting there in their hoodie jamming away on a keyboard and didn't want to be bothered, right? It's much more of a it's a lot more gelled together, so to speak.
I would add, Andrew, if you're not an effective communicator, if you don't like public speaking or presentation, like, be upfront with the employer about that and focus on your strengths, because they could tailor that job to you. And there are plenty of rooms. I mean, we need so many people in cybersecurity that there's plenty of room to find the right fit in a company and not sell yourself on skills that you don't have, and you're going to be much happier in your employment.
Exactly.
That actually brings up a valid point. Something that I would want to echo is that in the interview, don't put yourself out there as having skills, whether it's technical skills or soft skills, that you don't really possess, right? I've seen many an interview get messed up where they're like, oh, you're good at Python scripting. Tell me about this. And the person sits there like, oh, I was exposed to it, right? Don't do that. Be your authentic self and focus on what you can do and speak to and do well, for sure.
Right.
Exactly. And I would, to kind of echo that, if you don't want to do something, don't say that that's what you can do or that's what you want to do. I would be upfront and say, yes, I can do coding, but I would prefer something a little bit more front of house, or, I don't want to do the public speaking. I would prefer to be in the office doing the programming, the technical aspect.
Cool. Right. Well, so for a lot of the folks that are on this call right now, they're kind of at that inflection point in their careers where they're like, all right, I don't necessarily have a ton of real world working experience within cybersecurity. Right. So they're looking at, okay, let me get this cert, let me take this class. Right. How is that person going to stack up, or how are they going to be able to get their foot in the door, I should say, for those types of roles when they're just fresh? How would they be able to get in, and what are some recommendations to them that you all could give?
You want to take that, Vince?
Sure. You know, I have mixed feelings about certifications because I've seen plenty of candidates that have 10 certifications but really don't have a lot of common sense. Um, and then I've seen folks that have no certifications and are just incredible. Um, and so, the way I think about it is, when I'm hiring for positions, I'm typically not getting resumes cold sent to me, and the ones that I do are typically pretty wonky, and you get a lot of noise. And so we're working either we're searching on Indeed or another platform, or we're working with a recruiter, and so there's some sort of filtering that takes place, right? And your job in terms of getting to these positions is getting through that filtering to have a chance to have a discussion. And so that's where kind of these certifications come in. And so I think about certifications as, how do you make it through the filters? And then also certifications in training around your specialties. I'd rather see somebody that says, look, I'm really interested in security, and I've taken a bunch of courses on all sorts of different security engineering topics. And you may not have the check the box certification, but you have a lot of technical expertise. And so, it's kind of a tough battle for new hires, to navigate those wickets. And that's where I think, working with recruiters is helpful, because you can have a discussion with them and they're going to be able to position you the strongest way possible. You would think in this market, when there's a negative unemployment rate in cybersecurity, that you don't need a recruiter. But I do think there is value there, because they're trying to position jobs that are good for you and good for your talents and expertise.
Totally. I feel the very same way about certs, right? You've got some people who have them all, and they're not very good at doing, they're good at learning. And then you've got, again, the people that don't have any, but have done a lot of studying, they've got the hands-on experience, but it goes back into knowing people. I do think that there's a huge piece of networking. And so groups like VCSA, and some of the other just smaller groups. I mean, even if you're looking at CompTIA or SANS and you're looking at some of those study groups, being able to talk to people in the field, is one really good way to get your foot in the door. And I think you can still get internships or associate level roles. And I think that those get your foot in the door at a lot of organizations is a great stepping stone. So some things like that are super important.
Very good point on the networking piece, for sure. I mean, what's the saying? People hire who they know, right? And it's either through those networking groups, which also shows drive and initiative and ambition, that you're really curious, like we talked about before, about the field, right? You're taking extra time to go meet, to go learn, to go do those types of things. But showing that initiative is cool. Other things you could do as well is do like a capture the flag event, like they're putting on here, right? Getting that experience and kind of going through it, and having teammates potentially where you could say, hey, I did this. It's something to add onto your resume. Back to the certs thing, I agree. Certs are important for people that don't have as much real world experience. It kind of gets you in the door, so to speak. Once in the commercial sector, once you've been doing it for a long time, I don't believe that they really matter at all. It's about what you yourself can do. With the caveat, though, that if you're in the government services side of the house, you do need the certs, because that's how the work is awarded, that you're going to have X number of CISSPs and what have you, right? But on the commercial side, as you keep going through, I don't necessarily see as much personal value there, but what do we know? All right, so moving forward there, from a technical standpoint though, right? Because we talked about the soft skills, what would you suggest from a technical avenue that folks on this call should work on to make themselves more attractive, right? Is it focusing on the capture the flag stuff? Is it learning to do Python scripting? Is there a particular technical avenue where it would make sense for them to say, all right, I've done this part, now I'm going to go down this avenue? Or is it a matter of, what are they curious about, and they kind of just go that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is you can go a little bit more broad in your kind of foundational knowledge, whether it's programming, learning to debug, networking, some of the reverse engineering. But if that's not what you want to focus on, that's not in your career, that's not where it's going to be valuable to spend your time. So if you're really curious about red teaming or blue teaming, go as deep as you can into that and learn as much as possible. And then kind of start to get to the periphery of vision or peripheral areas as well on the technical side, that kind of touch into it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think how you spend your time, your free time, your creative time tells an employer where your real passions lie. So, if you're really interested in networking and you've done a lot of, research on networking and security engineering, what about volunteering for a nonprofit to do it, right? So if you like coding, I think unless you're a high-end developer, the question is, do you have the capacity and intellectual curiosity to learn to code, right? And so there it may be beneficial to say, look, I'm going to learn a couple different languages to demonstrate my ability to pick up languages and experiment with them, right? And if you're interested in pen testing, pen testing is, in my mind, is much less kind of a science and engineering task as it is a task about creative problem solving and trying to think about the world differently than everybody else. And the best pen testers, I've worked with are folks that, may not have had a technical background in the beginning, but they just see the world a little bit differently. They're the people that, as they walk down the street, think about like how many video cameras are on that building and how could I get around it, right? Or how could I break into this? And those are the skill sets that make a great pen tester, unless you're doing, automated vulnerability scans and calling that pen testing.
Cool. No, that's a very good point. So that also dovetails into something else, right? So there are very heavily technical components within the cybersecurity industry, right? Or technical career paths, I should say. What are some of the other ones if someone isn't necessarily hyper technical? What's another path that someone could potentially go down? And are there manager openings as well for some of these folks that have been working, might be an IT manager that have been for 10 years, but want to get into the security side?
Yeah, I think if you look at what's been done around the NICE framework, you can get a sampling of all the different career paths there are. But I always like to joke when I'm talking we do a lot of work with small and medium businesses. That's the whole mission of our company, is how do we bring cybersecurity to small and medium-sized companies. And in that market, most people don't have a lot of security expertise and they're afraid of cybersecurity. And so one of the things I always tell folks is, the punchline at the end of the joke of cybersecurity is it's about boring old risk management, right? And so if you understand how to manage risk and how to think about managing risk in the context of firewalls, in the context of analytics, in the context of, deploying, protection systems, you have a leg up. And so to me, like, there's a lot of room to run in the security space if you understand risk management and how to apply those principles. So you can go to security engineering from there. You can go to compliance and risk management from there. You can go to vendor risk management. There are a lot of ancillary components in the security market that risk management is a key part of.
Yeah, I would say another, kind of avenue that you can take is if you are a little bit less technical, but you like understanding and you like helping customers and you like answering problems, is kind of that customer success, customer relations side of the house, right? Because there are so many cybersecurity products out there, threat intelligence products that companies are using that, they need to learn how to use. So there's that aspect from the customer success and also even sales, right? Those that have a good understanding, have some security knowledge, can go onto the sales route as an account executive. They can even do sales engineering, which is a little bit of the technical piece plus the sales. So there's that avenue as well.
Lacey, can you expand or expound on those types of roles for some of the folks on the call that might not be familiar with what a customer success manager, engineer, whatever, what their day-to-day tasks are versus solutions architect, sales engineer, and that type of stuff, just so people can maybe understand different potential career paths that are out there for them at a vendor like both y'all?
Yeah, totally. So I think one of the best starting points, if you want to get into more of the sales side of the house, would be a business development rep. So those are really the ones that are looking for, you know, the CISOs online, the buyers of product, and they're making cold calls, they're dialing, they're asking a lot of questions, they're listening. And then from there, you would go into an account executive type of role, which is really selling the product, figuring out what the problem is that the company is trying to solve, and then selling how Recorded Future or, you know, CrowdStrike or any of these other companies will solve that problem. From there, account managers and sales engineers work really closely. And the sales engineer is going to talk a little bit more about the technical capabilities of the product and how it would fit into their existing SOC operations, for example. And then on the architecture side, really, they're the ones that are going to integrate it into their current operations, making sure it's working. Once the product has been installed and gone live with the client, that's where customer success is going to come in and really help triage, make sure that they're getting the most out of the product, it's working how they need it to, and again, keeping them happy so that they continue using the product.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Vince, in a similar vein, in terms of what are some of the more traditional career paths that someone coming in on the quote unquote technical side of the house or the enterprise side of the house, like for instance, all right, you're starting off as a tier 1 SOC analyst, and then you go up and out to what, to where? What are the different paths that they could take?
Yeah, there are a lot of paths. You know, I think coming into let's say you're at a Fortune 500 company versus coming into a government role versus coming into a vendor, right? There are a lot of different paths on that. So let's talk about like a larger company. You know, they're trying to staff a security operations center with folks that can kind of watch the lights and kind of keep an eye on things, right? So a basic security analyst or security kind of operations analyst is going to be watching the dashboards, watching the tickets, watching the alerts, kind of learning how to pick between signal and noise to figure out what matters, what's important. You may do some initial triage, you may not, and then you elevate it to an analyst that's going to take that and say, okay, we got an alert on this system. What other systems do we have data in? How can I correlate this to figure out if it's something serious or not? At which point you might go up to a more senior analyst who then is going to start to drive the detailed investigation. You know, typically, you know, if you're going up the stack of kind of junior to senior analyst, you might then drive into a response mode, right? So incident response, forensics. So starting to lock down systems, starting to work with the IT teams that manage the infrastructure to lock things down and start to prevent, you know, whatever that is from spreading. And then on the forensic side, you can get into, you know, going through logs and correlating events, doing imaging of machines. You know, you can go pretty deep on that end. So that can be a full career path for somebody going through those parts and pieces.
Yeah, certainly a ton of different directions it can go in once you get in. And then I think that's kind of the main, what people here are going to be interested in, right? Is, all right, we need to get our foot in the door here. But then once you get that general experience, you might find that you're passionate about something more so than others. And you can kind of go that path. That's the beauty of this industry, is that there's so many different ways to go, right? So it's pretty cool. All right. So we touched on a little bit at the beginning about interviewing, what to kind of focus on versus not focus on. But we're still looking at, all right, these folks are starting off, they want to get their foot in the door somewhere, right? What tips would you give them? Like, so when you're reading a resume, right, and you said, all right, it checks the box, what are something that's going to reach out and grab you and say, all right, this person might be worth talking to, right, on their resume?
I think looking back at their historical experience and how it applies to the job, I remember kind of one really good hire that I remember making probably, I don't know, 8 years ago, was a woman who hadn't done much in security, but had done a lot in kind of the analytics in like signal to noise analytics in a space that wasn't even close. And, you know, when talking about security, she had a lot of really good things to say, and she was saying the right things. As soon as I asked her about that background and kind of statistical analysis, like, she lit up, right? And it was like, you could tell that was her passion. It's like, well, why do you like that? And she's like, well, I just love the problem solving of separating signal from noise and trying to dig into this and like not giving up until you figure out how the statistics work and how the analytics work. And I can take that skill set and put her in a cyber analyst position, and she's going to do well. And she did great. I mean, and she's had a great career. And so it's kind of fun to find people like that. And I think it's really applicable to this audience. Is how do you take your experience and what makes you happy and apply it into this space? And if you're somebody that's trying to retrain and get into security because it's going to make you some money and you're not passionate about it, there are certainly some jobs you can find, but you got to be careful about kind of selecting those, and you're probably going to look at larger companies where you can fit in as part of a larger machine. And so that's the other thing I'll say here before I let you talk, Lacey. It's just the thinking about the company size. Regardless of what you want and what the company wants, if you're joining a company of less than 50 people, it's going to be a completely different experience than if you're joining a company of 200 to 250 people. The roles are different, the experience is different, the infrastructure is different. Like when we're hiring BDRs and sales folks and sales engineers, like we have very little infrastructure because we're a small company, and so you don't have a lot of people around to support you. When you're in a larger company, lots of process, lots of infrastructure, and so you got to really think about the company size you're going into.
Cool. Lacey, what do you look for?
So I think for me, those were some really great points. Is a resume that's not overcomplicated. Keep it simple. Talk about your experience and talk about what you've accomplished, and how it again how you can relate it to this field. So if you are in more of a service industry type role, you have worked in a fast-paced environment. You have had to deal with a lot of random problems coming up and having to triage them quickly and come up with solutions. So there are ways to sell it, right? Sell yourself, but don't make it too complicated. If you're seeing a 3-page resume, I think any recruiter will tell you they rarely get to the 3rd page, if the 2nd. So keep the important information up front. If you don't have, again, a lot of the hands-on corporate experience, but you've taken a lot of classes that fit into some things, put that on there. That's relevant experience, and you can show how you're willing to learn and go above and beyond. And then when you are, in that interview, asking questions, what it's like to work at the company, what makes an employee successful, right? What skill sets, hard skills, soft skills, those are really important. And asking about training, especially as someone who's got, a little bit less experience, what is their training program? Are people just kind of thrown in to the fire day one, like figure it out? Great, that works for some people, but others it doesn't. And if it is one of those, you just are thrown to the fire, be willing to ask questions. That is something that has very much helped me get into the cybersecurity field and understand it. And people are so willing to help in this industry. That's something that I've learned. They're willing to answer questions. So ask. That
brings up a very good point in regards to training, right? Because I think that might be some things that a lot of folks on this call would be curious about. It's like, okay, I got the job. I have this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but now what do I do? Right. And so I would ask you guys, what are some ongoing training type of scenarios? Like, how do you guys onboard new hires, right? Generally, how often are you talking to them? What's the training programs look like? Are they sent to conferences? How does it look at your respective organizations? Because I've seen the full gamut, right? I've seen very detailed, structured. It's this. And I've seen others, like Lacey talked about, where it's, well, you'll figure it out. Here you go. And then it becomes imperative on that employee to go, oh man, I got to figure this out. But then to find mentors and things of that nature that can help kind of shepherd you through.
This is where a lot of the conflict in hires that I've seen in the past comes. Like, if you sell yourself as a self-starter, somebody that doesn't, that can thrive in an environment that doesn't have a lot of structure, and then your first week on the job, you're like, okay, get me my training programs. That's in conflict with what you sold yourself as. And if you're somebody that needs that, you need to recognize that, and you probably don't want to go to a small company. right? Because small companies don't have that infrastructure and those resources. I mean, we do send our folks to training as we can, but when you're going into a small company of less than 30 people, it's all hands on deck all the time. Like taking a week off to go to a training course is a really hard sell. If you're going to a large company, maybe like Recorded Future, like you're going to have a very structured training program. You're going to get a lot of hand holding and a lot of mentoring. And so coming back to that alignment of really have clear expectations of what you need and what that company has. And so if you need that, talk about it in the interview. Ask those questions.
Yeah, asking about what the training looks like in an interview is a very good question. Here at Recorded Future, all employees start on a Monday. If Monday is a holiday, it's a Tuesday. But so there's a onboarding, kind of get the general information, get your computer set up. But then, and you have one-on-ones with your manager that day. They kind of set you up on a whole plan for the first weeks, month. And then usually there's regular cadence. We also have a program called Propel, which is every new hire that starts within the month, they do the next month's Propel, and they get a even more in-depth training about Recorded Future, the different departments, how they relate, all of the module talk. And then again, we really believe in employer development. So we have access to LinkedIn Learning, access to Cybrary. There is training budget for people. So you talk to your manager and you say, okay, here's what I would like out of my career. This is what I'm looking for. This is how I want to develop. Do you have suggestions on which classes or courses I should take or certs? Here's my thoughts. And how can we do that? How can we accomplish it? Yeah.
Cool. What would be your all's advice in the opposite scenario of that, right? Someone got in, got their foot in the door, got an interview, got hired, and then for whatever reason, they found themselves on an island in a sink or swim type of scenario, right? Where there isn't a lot of training available. What would you suggest for them to do at that point?
Well, hopefully you didn't get into that situation blind, because that means either you didn't ask the right questions, or the employer wasn't telling you the truth about the job. I think if you do find yourself in that position, then I think you owe it to yourself and the company to remedy it as soon as possible. If that's like, look, this is not what I expected it to be, I need to move on. No harm, no foul. I would rather somebody come to me, and we actually had this happen where we hired a pretty senior developer that had done their own startups a couple of times, had been a CISO of their startups. We brought him on board. We had lots of great discussions, completely transparent about where we were as a company. In the first week, he's like, look, this just isn't a good fit. And it was like, okay, great. Like, move on, let's part ways. I would much rather that happen than struggling for months and lack of performance and disgruntledness. And what's going to happen out of that is, if you decide like it's not a right fit right off the bat, you're going to be more likely to get a positive feedback from the next employer. Like, look, we had an open discussion, than if your performance is trash and it's just like, I wouldn't hire this guy. Right.
Great point.
To kind of echo that would just be speak up, ask questions. Coming to Recorded Future, I was right into the fire recruiting and didn't have a big, strong security background. I didn't really know much about cybersecurity, and I was super intimidated. But I just asked questions. I asked the CEO questions. I asked our head of security questions. And I just decided, no question is too stupid, because I don't know it. And I don't know where to find the answers. So I'll figure it out. Unfortunately, that's worked out for me.
Awesome. Very cool. So some of these folks that are on the call right now listening have had careers in other areas, right? Whether it's in traditional IT, whether it's whatever, right? And they're looking to pivot into security. Do you think that they are essentially starting over, like from the back to the bottom, and work their way back up again? Or how do you view that in terms of where they are on their career path?
I mean, I think you've got skills. You have had a job, you have lived this far, use that in your role, right? Some people are really good at organization, and managing projects. So lean into your strengths and what you've already learned, but still be willing to get out of your comfort zone, try new things, and listen to, you know, what's worked really well for others.
The demand for people in the security market is incredible. There's a place for you. There are some headwinds. You know, if you've been in the insurance industry for 20 years and you want to get into cybersecurity, you know, the people in your peer group have had a lot more experience or are at certain salary levels, right? And so, you know, you sometimes get to a sticking point of salary expectations versus experience. And so you have to be flexible. You know, you really have to soul search and say, look, am I willing, you know, am I going to be expected to be compensated along with my peers who have been in this industry for 20 years? Or am I going to be willing to start over potentially from a salary position and then with the expectation that I can grow faster as I demonstrate performance and experience? And that's kind of one thing you have to talk about. I think, you know, the other point is, you know, as you look at larger companies, there may be better roles, or in the federal government, there may be better roles given your experience than you're going to find in smaller companies. And so really kind of trying to, and again, this is where working with a recruiter, and I promise Drew didn't like push me to talk about recruiters, but it's like,
keep it up, Vince. It's great.
But it's like, you know, working with folks that understand these companies and their needs, you're going to find a better position than otherwise. And it, you know, it doesn't cost you to work with a recruiter. It costs the employers, and the employers are willing to pay it to get the right fit. So again, it's really about finding the right fit, about finding what passion drives you, how you can apply that to a job and jump in. We, you know, we've had interviews, some have gone well and some haven't, with folks that are new to this industry that have been in for 15 to 20 years in other industries. And all I'm looking is for the ability to learn and that passion, because the technical skills on most of these jobs can be picked up pretty easy if you have the right mindset. Unless you're talking about a hardcore developer or a reverse engineer or
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
those sorts of things.
You brought up kind of the skills shortage within cybersecurity, and that's been it's been a pressing topic that's been out there since probably 2017 or so. What areas within cyber do you see the most glaring pressing need currently? Like, what's where's that super need, A, and B, what's the quote unquote hottest roles? I guess they kind of correlate, right? But what are the roles that everyone wants to aspire to get these days?
I think there's a role, it's kind of a soft description, but a utility player, right? Somebody that has experience, that understands the management of risk, that understands some of these compliance frameworks, that has some technical skills to understand how to, you know, look at a firewall and log in and learn how that works, potentially to do some basic analytics. So some cross-cutting skill sets here. Because as you go down out of the larger Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, there are a lot of companies that need to hire cyber talent, but they can't hire somebody that fills a specific role. And so, you know, I hesitate to say CISO light because I think that portrays the wrong thing, but somebody that can come into an organization with enough technical expertise to bring that organization up the curve.
Cool. Good deal. Lacey, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree. You know, is there's a lot of different roles right now, right? There's so many openings at all companies that you can pretty much, we'll take almost anything. So if you're willing to put in the work, if you're curious and figure out what's needed to get done, you're going to do well. And you'll open up more opportunities for yourself within that organization that you're in, and in other organizations that you could potentially want to join in the future.
Gotcha. Cool. So I'll say from my experience in terms of what I see, it kind of follows the news cycle, right? Like, so the majority of my clients that are coming to me to do kind of higher end searches right now, they're looking for people with what? Industrial control systems experience. And, you know, they wanted to be able to do hardcore incident response, right? So in anytime there's some sort of breach or incident, that need kind of tailors what folks are asking us for. And it's like clockwork. In terms of what you guys out there are looking at in terms of the skill shortage, there are some roles certainly that are much in higher demand than others. And there's some that have a little bit more people in them, right? What I see a lot of times when people are just starting out is they're like, oh, I want to be a pen tester. I want to be a pen tester because that's the perception they have of what a lot of security is. So a lot of folks get blinders on and say, I'm just doing pen testing certs. Okay. So I would say take the blinders off and figure out what you're really passionate about, what compels you, and what's exciting to you. Right. So with that, I wanted to kind of ask for final advice from everybody as we kind of go around, things that you want to share with the group in terms of what's going to work for them, and perhaps guiding them as they start their new career paths.
I guess for me, it's kind of a theme, which is, finding your passion and finding the things that make you tick, and aligning the jobs in your career to that. I think that'll make you happier in your career. One thing, it may not be obvious, but there's an incredible amount of investment money flowing into the security market, into product companies. And say your goal is to become a security analyst or a CISO or whatever, it's not a bad place to start to do the sales engineer route, right? You can be an effective sales engineer with some basic security expertise, or some basic firewall expertise, or some basic analyst capabilities, and you're not having to have hardcore skills. You just have to have people skills. And so to get a couple of years, so say you go to Recorded Future for a couple of years as a sales engineer and hone your technical skills, it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for you. So I think that's a non-obvious career path that a lot of people may not see, is, starting out on the sales side, because it gets you into a named company, it gets you experience, and it can start you on the right path. And just in closing, I'll say it again, be upfront in the interviews. Don't think of an interview as like, I've got to win this no matter what. Treat it as like, I've got to make sure this company's a good fit for me and this role's a good fit for me. And you'll be a lot better off.
Awesome. Lacey, what's your final parting advice for the group?
Yeah, I think I kind of mirror what Vince is saying. Is here we have 3 values at Recorded Future. The first one is be passionate. The others are inclusive and ethical. So that passion is really going to drive you. It's going to drive you to be successful. You're going to want to do well when you have that interest in what you're learning, and being curious, asking questions, learning as much as you possibly can, because it makes a difference. You can solve a lot of problems just by going on LinkedIn, YouTube, talking to other professionals in this industry. It's really important. And I think the other really big point to make is how important diversity is in security. I think the more perspectives that we have, Recorded Future, at Dark, at anywhere, right? We are trying to disrupt adversaries. We are trying to stop bad guys in their tracks. So we need to figure out how they think and how they can, take advantage of different openings or threats. So you gotta think, the more perspectives that we have in this industry, the better off we are, from a global perspective. So that's really important. And I think being honest, asking questions during the interview process, making sure it's the right fit for you, is huge. So those are my takeaways.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll say, from my standpoint, one of the things that I would advise strongly for, and you hear this a lot, if you're serious about getting a job in this industry, treat finding a job like it's a job, right? Talk to whoever you can, right? Whether it's a recruiter, whether it's an internal recruiter, whether it's someone at your networking group, whether it's referrals, right? People hire who they know. So who do you know that can introduce you to someone else, right? And that also will get you an additional foot in the door. There's going to be rejection. It's not going to be a walk in the park all the time, right? So as many touch points as possible that you can get them. Worst case, you just met a new person. No harm, no foul, right? So with that, that's about all that I had question-wise. I want to thank Vince, and I want to thank Lacey for hopping on and spending their time with us. We will be all available in the breakout room here for about 10 minutes in case anybody had some additional questions that they wanted answered. Other than that, feel free to ping me and everyone else on LinkedIn if you wanted to connect, and hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Yeah. Thank you so
guys.
much.
Thanks, everybody.